At its winter meeting over the weekend, the Democratic National Committee has come out in favor of an amendment to the Constitution that would ensure that every American has the ability to vote, which seems like an odd thing that you would need to have to do in America, which is a democracy, perhaps the longest standing democracy currently existing. We still in 2015 have to pass an amendment that says, oh yeah, and with all the other rules and all the other regulations we have on individuals and groups and corporations, you also get to vote. But this is something that's actually happening. So this is what they actually voted for at the DNC. They voted in favor of amending the United States Constitution to explicitly guarantee an individual's right to vote. They want to set up state groups to set up the referenda to get this passed, since of course you need it to pass in both the states and in both houses of Congress. And they want to create a right to vote task force. And to go along with this, Representative Keith Ellison of Minnesota has passed a bill. He says that we've been expanding the franchise in America. That's the trajectory of history, which is sort of true for the most part. But in recent years, folks who don't want everybody to vote have been very busy. And they're trying to peel back the trajectory of opportunity to vote and participate in our society. Now, Keith Ellison is one of what I consider relatively the good guys in Congress, and certainly the Democratic Party doing this is a good thing. But has there ever been as strong an indictment of American democracy than the fact that we need to amend the Constitution which sets up our democratic republic, to say that people can actually vote? Now, if you know anything about American history, and hopefully most Americans know this, and if you live in another country, you probably are even more likely to know it. It has been, throughout our history, sort of a challenge to expand the vote to more and more groups. I mean, for women to gain the right to vote, for minorities to gain the right to vote, and along the way, we've also taken that right away from groups, felons and things like that. But now we need to protect it. Like, bear in mind that off on the side, from TYT's point of view, Wolfpack is trying to make sure that your vote actually means something by getting money out of politics. But there are so many people who find it effectively impossible to vote, even if legally they have the right to vote. And what you're probably thinking is, well, why is this necessary? Doesn't the Constitution already protect your right to vote? And there are various protections already in the Constitution. The 15th Amendment protects you from being stopped from voting on account of your race, the 19th for your sex, the 26th for your age as long as you're 18 and older, the 24th stops the use of poll taxes and other financial requirements. But these are all jokes, of course, if you know anything about the political trickery that various groups, sometimes Democrats, especially Republicans, have gotten up to. And that the problem with these is that they only stop you from explicitly being prohibited from voting for those reasons. So you can't be stopped because you're black. But if they can find some way to selectively target mostly blacks, as long as it doesn't say that that's who they're targeting, for the most part, it seems like the Supreme Court these days, and especially state Supreme Courts, are going to be perfectly fine with that. You can't be barred based on your age. But of course, we know that they are trying, especially in the Republican Party, to make it very difficult for people in college who perhaps live in a state other than the one that they vote in, for them to vote. The elderly, it's going to be very difficult to vote. And basically how this happens is they set up various requirements for ID, for having to have certain paperwork, for having to pay and things like that. And then they go even beyond that. There I'm actually talking about the laws that have been passed in multiple states over at least the past 10 years that have been chipping away at these protections that were already in the Constitution to try to make it harder and harder to vote. But when you listen to like Fox News, for instance, I mean, they're saying that if you're a young girl, you should just stay on Tinder. You shouldn't try to vote. I mean, they want to make it far more difficult. They say that you should have to pass some sort of civics test or something like that to be able to be a citizen of the United States. And look, I would love for you to have that civic knowledge. The fact that you're watching political news on YouTube says that you're probably in a fairly high percentile when it comes to political sophistication to begin with. But this is where we're at in 2015, that the Democratic Party feels the need to at least try to make it a little bit easier to vote. And then even in this article, which is on MSNBC, by the way, that I'm doing some research on this, they say, well, of course it's a non-starter. You'd have to pass, both houses of Congress, of course. You'd have to pass 38 of 50 states, non-starter, to vote. And as I always say, I understand that this is sort of one of my issues. As I always say, this seems like it would be the easiest issue in the history of the United States to vote on. To go and say, I am in favor of democracy. I am in favor of you exercising your patriotic rights. I mean, they love to say on the right that the soldiers go abroad, they die so that we can be, citizens of a democratic country, so we can exercise these rights. So the Democrats could simply come out in support of those rights and force the Republicans to be explicitly against them. And one of the ways that I always come back to this, and I understand I've said this multiple times on the show before, is that when they had the opportunity, when Barack Obama became president, and they had a relatively much stronger position in both the House and in the Senate, they should have made a day, an election day, a federal holiday in which you get to take off work and you go and you vote in elections. It would have been the easiest thing in the world to pass. You would have had almost universal approval for it. People love voting. Sort of. They certainly love the idea of living in a democracy, and they love getting off work, and they didn't fight for that. So look, what's going to come of this from the DNC? Probably nothing, but it's certainly good that they're at least putting it out there so that some Democrats will be able to use it in the next campaign to say that they are in support of it. Perhaps they can bring it up at a debate. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but we do live in a democracy. Maybe we should start acting like it.